This conference will now be recorded.
Good evening, everyone. Oh, thank you. I feel like I'm back in school. I like that. All right, so thank you for being a part of our conversation this evening. For most of you, I know some have been here before, but there is new information in the slide based on some questions that we've received in the last 2 weeks. Just to clarify some points as it relates to our public infrastructure, I want to preface the discussion with not the capital overview council got on February the 10th. That was 98 slides. I have really pared that down for you all. So this covers water, wastewater, and the things such as facilities and streets. That's for another day. Mostly because at the moment it's not very timely. We are looking at some bonds on the agenda for May the 4th and for early voting that you as Rome residents are going to have to make a decision about. Once that decision is made, we will either implement or not the direction that we receive from the community. But I am hopeful that the pictures you see, the questions that you have answered tonight, provide you all with the information you need so that you feel like you can make an informed decision. That's really the best that we can do. I'm also going to preface this discussion with the fact that city staff and city council members are not allowed to lean you one way or the other. All we can do is provide factual information, and you all have to decide from there. So I want to be clear about that. I'm happy to answer whatever questions come my way. If I don't have an answer, I will get one and get back to you. We did add some slides in this as it relates to our ground storage water tanks, because from our presentation 2 weeks ago to today, I saw some things posted on social media, and I had some feedback from council that these were still questions that they were getting out in the general public. There are a few others that I'm happy to answer. I watch social media, but I don't comment. That's not my place. My place is just to see what the community needs and be able to respond if it's a necessity. So just bear with us. Most of these slides, as I say, were drawn from a larger presentation that we gave to council on a Saturday as far as a capital improvement or capital improvement planning program, if you will, that looked at everything in your infrastructure from stormwater runoff, facilities, roads, to all the topics that we're going to cover today. So we have brought this back down to a lower level so that we don't end up keeping you here for 5 hours like we did council. You'll advance that for me, ma'am. Shayna's going to help with the slide deck. Last time I understand that it stayed on the face page of the slides and did not progress through the rest of them. So we've saved it in a different format, and we are hopeful that as we scroll through these, that they are visible to those that are out in the general public or watching it online. If someone's watching it online and has a friend in this audience and can tell me if they are or are not scrolling, I would be extremely grateful. Does that make sense? Thank you. Mr. Johnson here. We're going to decide which one. So let me also preface the conversation in this. We did not set this up as a council meeting, and I know there has been some conversation in the community as to why council is not present and accountable for these discussions. I can promise you that council has heard the information that I am giving to you all, and if this was set up in a council format, there is no give and take in the discussion. I'm presenting to council, council's giving me direction, and that is as far as the meeting goes. When you see city council meetings that have become more of a give and take with those in the audience, you have moved off of the council framework and you are no longer handling the council's business. I only get to meet with my bosses twice a month, and it's in a council meeting. I work for 6 individuals, and they give me direction what to do with staff at that council meeting. And if it becomes more of a town hall forum like this, then it ceases to be about the business of the city of Rome. So we're just trying to clear up some things that we have seen posted and some questions that we know have come about as it relates to why this is a town hall and why this is led by staff. So you saw one council member leave because she was at the last meeting, and you saw a council member come in that was not at the last meeting that I held 2 weeks ago. If I have 3 or more council members in this room, we are now officially in quorum. We're in a council meeting, so I have to make sure there's only. So you will see Mr. Loftus here and Mr. Johnson. I don't know where he ended. There you are, sir. He's in his normal spot there on the dais. So they can ask any questions they have as well, but they've already seen all these slides that I'm presenting to you all this evening. So looking ahead at the bonds that we have on the ballot, I think most of you are aware that there are 3 bonds. We have Proposition A, which is $3 million, which would cover the drilling of water wells for the community. Our hope is to get 3 wells. We've been quoted a price of about $750,000 per well based on how deep and how far apart we have to put them and whether or not we can take advantage of any of our current infrastructure. We will talk about water wells further on in the presentation, so just bear with me. But if you do have questions, feel free to raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone. Proposition B is as it relates to the West wastewater treatment plant. That is the photos that you see depicted here in this room. If you can't see them easily, or if you'd like to see them later, I have put the presentation for April the 3rd and the recording and all of the FAQ documents which you were given here this evening. I have also put these photos out there so that people can see them who are not able to attend, along with the sample ballots and information. Thank you, Mr. Loftus, for the reminder that Northwest is also having an election for their board, and you all will be asked to vote on that. So it's pretty comprehensive. If there's something you think I missed, let me know. But hopefully that can be more of a one-stop shop for you. If you just go to the city's website and look right on the front page, just scroll down a little, you'll see all that information there. So Proposition B, as it relates to the West wastewater treatment plant, is for $11 million. This would replace the current plant that we have that has been in production since 1999 and has exceeded its lifespan. Mr. Dominguez is here on my right. He is our Public Works Director, and he can also answer some questions for you as we go along. Proposition C is for $3.5 million, and this would fix the I&I, which is a fancy way of saying that we have stormwater that's running off into our old clay pipes that have broken underground, or it's going in through our manholes that are helping to overwhelm the West plant. And when it gets overwhelmed, that's when we end up with what we call a non-compliance event that we have to report to TCEQ. We'll talk about that more as we go through this conversation. We did have one of those last week, so I'm happy to discuss that with you. Now, going to the next slide, please, ma'am. This is where people always want to know, first and foremost, what does this mean to me? And that's completely understandable. It's your community. You all are going to be the ones that have to decide if this investment is something you want to support, because it will affect some of you financially. It will not affect those that have claimed a 65 and older exemption homestead on their property. If you are a disabled individual and you're 100% or some lesser portion that in disabled, it would affect you less. So just want to clear that up from the beginning, because I know there's been a lot of folks that through this methodology have questioned what it means to those who are over 65 or disabled. Bonds and the way the bonds are structured in the state of Texas give them some protection. If we happen to go a different direction and say all 3 of the bonds do not pass, we still have to fix this West plant regardless. So the city council and staff will have to present information for alternatives. One of the alternatives would be to change water and sewer rates. That will not exempt 65 and older and those that are disabled. That will be paid by everyone equally. So I just want to be clear on the distinctions between this. There's also the advantages of financing out this work for 30 years, which is very helpful, and it is a tool that cities have used for years and years and years. No city that I know of has enough free cash laying around to cash fund these type of projects. Yes, sir?
Okay, you're talking about this is what the tax increase would be to our citizens. Can you tell me how that compares to what your tax rate would be after the bonds, the 2 existing bonds that we have roll off?
So it's a net change of 30 cents to us if all 3 are passed. We currently have 2 bonds, one that will be paid off in this fiscal year and one that will be paid off in the next fiscal year. So the total impact of these 3 bonds is 42 cents, but currently our debt rate is 12 cents. So as those start to roll off, you're going to equalize out, and it's a net difference of 30 cents.
Oh, for the $400,000 home per month is $141. What would it be be reduced by on the dollars per month for a $400,000 home. For the two bonds rolling off,
It'd be 12 cents per $100 valuation. I don't have that calculated separately for those numbers, but that's roughly the remaining debt that we have on the books. About 7 cents or 5 cents, and I don't recall which order it comes in, will roll off this year. And then in the next year, the remainder will roll off. The other thing that's important to understand about these bonds is this is fully loaded, meaning the first year you're only going to pay interest. So it's not as if we just jump off the cliff and all of a sudden your tax rate goes up 30 cents. It is a little bit different in that you graduate into it. So if the community approves these and in the election in May we get that direction, then in August, September timeframe is when we actually issue the bonds. The first year pay interest only. The second year you would pay the full amount for all of the projects. And by then the West plant will be in, the wells will be drilled, and we will be well underway of fixing the manholes, the old clay pipes, etc.
the quick math is it'd be 5760. So you're 141 minus the 5760.
Yeah.
You're saying both of the projects will be done in 2 years?
That what we have looked at for the West plant and the approach that we're taking is potentially within 12 months after we ink the contract. Other questions? A lot of that will depend on, as you know, landscaping and rerouting and how much dirt work we have to do to put it in place. But that's one of the vendors we talked to have given us that timeline.
Have you done the calculation if this is a project we have to undertake as a city, what that would be if the bond didn't pass and it had to pass along in the sewer rate, what that would impact our bill monthly?
Not yet.
Okay.
There's just so many variables there. Depends on which one passes or doesn't. If we just focused on the West plants, the larger of the three projects, I have not calculated that as of yet.
So these numbers are assuming that we use every single cent of those bond
That
money.
is
So
correct.
if those projects come in under budget, it could be less than what we're looking at on the screen.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things that we've explained as we've gone along in this process is that this is the maximum amount that the city could borrow. We cannot exceed voter authority. So for instance, on the water wells, if 3 million is only going to get us 2 wells and it comes in at 2.5 or 2 million, then we only issue for 2 million. We don't issue for the 3. So it's kind of a backstop. That's the most that it would cost. It could be considerably less.
On the wastewater plant,
Mhm.
they expect you that it's going to be a year
Depends
to get it completed?
Depends on topography at the site, which is fairly flat, and we do have plenty of room at the West plant. We would have to do some dirt work to grade. We'd have to reconnect or reroute some of the current connections from the lift stations and the other things into the new, but it's a package plant, so it comes all together and it's delivered on site and assembled there.
Okay. Obviously, it's going to be much larger.
Potentially, yes.
It have to be with
Yeah.
all the new homes coming in. And then whomever, when you do the contract, the city of Rome does the contract with the contractor that's doing this. And when you said a year, does the city of Rome apply LDs if they don't make their date? Liquidated damages.
Generally, those kind of things are built in. To some extent, that's generally handled by the city attorney.
Okay. Thank you.
So for instance.
Look at you with your own microphone back there.
Volumes up. So I've been scared myself. We get to 3 million and we use 2 million. The other million cannot be used for anything else.
Correct.
I was just clearing it up for other people.
So
I
that
knew the answer.
that was another reason why the bonds are worded the way they are. In the past, I've had some feedback that some of our residents have been concerned about broad language being used in the bonds for a variety of different projects. So we kept it very specific so that it was very clear what we were trying to do. Your bond covenants and restrictions do not allow you to then divert that money, and I know some social media posts have said into salaries or other projects. You cannot legally use it for that under any circumstances. It's only for that particular project. There's a mic there for you,
Yes,
sir.
I've got the mic on. My name is Lewis with Texas Rural Water Association. I've been visiting with them, talking about rate studies and things like that. And I will say the main issue here is this money that it costs, say 3.5 million for 3 wells, which I think is very ambitious because it gets everything's going up constantly. In the past 3 years, we've seen major spikes in double, triple the amount of different things that it takes to run these water and wastewater plants. So this money right now, this $11 million on this Proposition B is, if you push it out and say we're going to make it a bond in 2 years, it's going to be 13, 14, 15 million by then.
We actually have cost of service or POCs from our engineer, and it has doubled in the time that council's been talking about this. And I understand there's been some questions as to this just having come upon us and become an issue. I would like to assure the community that this has been ongoing since 2015. That is when we had a series of significant rain events that overflowed the West Plant and caused us to really get on the radar of TCEQ. So we have been under notice of enforcement in and out with them for, well, almost 10 years now. And we keep putting in the form the same response. The community is looking to replace the plant, et cetera, et cetera. We had a surprise visit from them 2 weeks ago Monday, that we now have been given direction from TCEQ that when we have an overflow event, we have some mandatory requirements from which to address that. We have to hire tanker trucks to come and haul the overflow off and remove it to another plant that can handle it. And we also have to remediate the creek from any overflow. So Chief Debus is showing you a photo of one of our recent spills. That brown flaky stuff is sewage that has overfilled that plant and is laying out on the ground surface. So we have to hire a tanker truck to come back in, and they will pull out all of the raw water that's just in and around the ground area. And then, I guess the one 2 weeks ago, do you want to explain what we had to do?
Yes, ma'am. So the tanker trucks, while the overflow is occurring, their intent is to pull as much of the wastewater going into the creek or going over the berm. We have a berm on the south side of the property to prevent an environmental impact. So as they're pulling, they're taking it off to Fort Worth, Dallas, and after that's done, any sludge that collects in the creek or past our facility has to be cleaned up by a Vactor truck. So it's a big vacuum truck, and all that has to be hauled off to a landfill or to Dallas or Fort Worth. But the spill, it just depends how big the overflow is. It could be right there in the immediate area, or if it goes 5 miles, we're responsible for 5 miles. If there's dead fish, it's a fine per fish. I want to say it used to be 2,000. I'm not sure. Is it 2,000? $2,000 per fish. So luckily, in that general area, there's no fish, but the further it pushes, I mean, the liability is there, and hopefully we don't come across that.
And how much does it cost every time you have to have a trucker come out and the vacuum thing?
So each truck is about $1,875 plus. That's a big tanker truck. Takes 7,000 gallons of liquid waste plus fuel. So I'd say a good $2,200, depending if they go to Dallas or Fort Worth. And then the Vactor is a 4-hour minimum, $475 per hour, and then emergency call is $500 on top. And there's no time frame. If the spill goes on for 6 days, it's 6 days on top of our employees being there day and night. Somebody has to be there, and it can add up, and there's no specific number.
So we estimated the one that we had 2 weeks ago to be about $15,000 for that particular cleanup. And it was not a large spill that really overwhelmed the plant. And as we get into more of the information on the plant, Mr. Dominguez can let you know some numbers that we received from TCEQ, which might help explain why we are under scrutiny, for lack of a better word, by TCEQ, because we have, in the life of that plant, in a short life, we have expressed a lot of raw sewage out of it. So the reason that's important is this is an environmental issue. So most people just think, well, it's sewage. It's not that big of a deal. It lays on the ground. It's not such a problem. But when it gets into Oates Creek, which is, it abuts the, I don't have a good photo of that, but it's there adjacent to our west plant, and Oates Creek feeds into the Trinity. And the Trinity becomes much larger, much quicker. So it can get to be extremely expensive for each one of these overflows. The fact that the plant was built in the late 90s and hasn't been upgraded or significantly improved at all since it was put in place, it cannot take any rain because we run pretty close to capacity all the time. So the rain that's predicted for Saturday, we're watching it very closely because we may have another rain event that we're going to have to call people out. And if we're doing this, especially in the spring and the fall, and it's a $15,000 or $20,000 minimum cost to us, that's going to get very expensive very quickly, and it is not budgeted. Okay, so any more questions on this slide? Because as I mentioned, there's a bunch of information. I want to make sure you get to see for your own self some of the things that we have witnessed. So this just gives you a broad overview of what the system entails. I'm not going to walk you through all of this. As I mentioned, we're not discussing every component piece of this, like the roadway systems and the storm drainage. We're not getting into that this evening, so if you'll go to the next slide, please, ma'am. So this is a look at all of the studies that the city has had done since the 2015-16 timeframe coming forward. It's not as if the city hasn't studied this issue or gotten professional opinions on this issue or had other people come in and tell us what we need to do and made plans. The problem is we've not executed any of those plans. And I'll talk about that some as we get further in to this presentation. We are very fortunate that we have this information to work off of. For a city our size, you often don't find this. But the problem becomes, if we don't actually implement any of it, then it's really not worth the time, effort, or energy that the city put into it. So be mindful. I'm just showing you this so that you know this isn't just something that came up today. I can tell you that in my research and scanning of records since I've been here, you've had at least 3 public works directors telling the city the same thing, including Mr. Dominguez. And I know the previous administrator said this, and now I'm saying this. There's no financial gain. There's no benefit to us per se. I know that's also been discussed on social media. This is really for you all. This is for the community, and you all have to make that choice. So when we look at, next slide, please, ma'am. Our water system assets, and this is the new information for those who are at the last presentation. The system was likely put in the 1940s and 50s, so that makes some of our lines getting close to 70 to 80 years old. Not abnormal. I don't want to leave you with the impression that we're all elderly in Rome, because we're not. But what we've not done well is upkeep and maintenance. We've deferred that to the point where some things just have to be completely replaced. We currently have 17.5 miles of supply and distribution line coming throughout the water system. We have about 660 connections to the system itself. I do expect that to change as life continues, and in the next 5 years, I won't be surprised if that number is twice that. As long as we have the water and can supply it, I have developers in my office every week. But I don't have water and sewer to give them. So I cannot bring any of those things that people would like to have to Rome, like a grocery store or other food opportunities or restaurants. Right now, we don't have the infrastructure to bring them in. And I know that that's been questioned, but we've spent time talking to somebody today that represents H-E-B, Wings, Taco Bell, and a bunch of other little type of restaurants that they're trying to find out what is the predicted growth in this area because we have so many homes coming in and around us. If you just think about what's coming in RVR, the PMB development, you're looking at anywhere from 8 to 10,000 homes just right there, in addition to what we bring, let alone if you drive further south down 81 287 and you look at that North Star development, or if you go back on 114 and look at Wildflower. I have had another developer call me today or this week about property adjacent to the Prairie Point site and whether or not it could either go industrial or could that go residential. So Rome is very high on people's interest list. And that's because of the highways that we intersect. We are literally the tip of the spear getting into Wise County from the south. You have to go through Rome to get there. So we either capture the sales tax and some of that benefit of the diversification of our tax base, or it moves on to Boyd or New Fairview or Decatur, and we don't capture. That's just the reality of development. So be mindful that this city is growing. Whether we can see it or not, it's coming to us, and we need to manage it as best we can. We currently have a loss rate in our system of about 19%. That's much higher than we want to see it. Unfortunately, we only have 4 people in public works, and they are engaged in the day-to-day and the issues that come up to do any type of analysis and design to lower that. So if you think about it, that's about 19% of our water. We don't know where it's at. So these are things that we need to address as we continue to evolve as the city and be better stewards of what we are buying, because we are buying that water at a pretty healthy rate. We do currently receive our water, the bulk of it, from Walnut Creek Special Utility District. That's not abnormal. Boyd gets some, Paradise, Decatur. Walnut Creek has a very large CCN. And we do have city wells that augment that. And we'll talk about that as we move through this presentation. If you'll move ahead, ma'am. So this is kind of an overview that I gave to council. And this may answer some of the questions that folks have about the ground storage water tanks and why those were not addressed in these bond packages. So to re-drill at current well sites or new well sites, the number we received from the Upper Trinity Groundwater Conservation District was about $750,000 per well. That's on average from what they've seen from cities in our area doing the same type of work. That's why we said on the bond documents 2 or 3 if we're lucky. And so that remains to be seen. But you will see that there is a need to rehab the ground storage tanks at the well sites. The Bobo pump station and the FM 3433 pump station need assistance. The elevated water tank, believe it or not, is due for overhaul. So I remember when that went up and thought, oh, that was just a couple, 2 or 3 years ago. No, it wasn't. So we're going to have to address that as we go through. So the total for some of those projects are about $500,000. Cities do not usually issue debt for $500,000. The cost of issuing the debt will outweigh the benefits of that particular project. So remember, we talked about not packaging these bonds together. We were very specific. They were for certain things. So we're going to look at some other opportunities from which to fix this. It's not as if we have forgotten. We just have other avenues from which to address it. So bear with us as we go through the presentation. So this is our Bobo pump station. This is where we get the bulk of our water from Walnut Creek. This tank is about, how big is that one, Mr. Dominguez?
400,000 gallons.
And it was brought online in 2005 and 2006, making this asset over 20 years old. And it was given to us used from Walnut Creek. I don't know the age because I don't know when they received it, but it was a great gift for Rome. All we had to do was pay to move it, which was a huge benefit to us. But it's going to need some work, and it could use a friend out there. We could use another one of these 400,000 gallon tanks because we need that capacity. If we can install a second tank on this site, we'll be looking at that and bringing it to council as we go forward. If you advance to the next set of slides, this is some of the stuff that gives people some pause. This is the inside of that tank that has been rusted and the paint has come off because of the chlorine gas that is used in treating the water. So currently, this is what, if you were to stand in the tank in the water and look up, this is what you're going to see. This is something that I know has been discussed on social media, that people are concerned and they don't want to drink water out of this tank, and I understand that as well. But there's a different avenue to address this issue, and I do think it's important that the community know what staff is seeing, that this is an issue that needs to be addressed in some form or fashion. So bear with us on the slideshow because you're going to get to see some things not normally shown to everybody else. This is our FM 3433 pump station. It gets its name from the road that it sits on. This tank appears to also have been brought online in approximately 2002, making this one over 20 years old. It's actually in better shape than the inside of the Bobo plant, so it needs minor repair and rehab. One of the other things that we've been asked by council is what have we done in preventative maintenance over the years? I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but I'm saying we don't have any documents in our records that show that any repair or maintenance was done. When we ask staff that's been here for a while, they can't recall either. So for those of you who have been watching what the city council's been doing, your administrative staff have spent a considerable amount of the last year scanning in every document we could find so that we didn't lose it if something happened to City Hall. And in that process, I didn't find any maintenance records for this plant. Go ahead. The next one is the elevated storage tank. This was actually installed in 2007, 2008. So it's been up there for a while. This is our only elevated tank. Our comprehensive development plan shows that the city of Rome is going to need 3 of these when we are fully fleshed out and built. We're not there yet, but at some point we will need that. Would you go to the next slide, please? So the last inspection that was done on this tank was in 2018. It's due for another inspection. At that time, when the inspection was conducted, they recommended that we work on the interior coatings and renovate that every 6 to 8 years and the exterior every 4 to 6. The interior cleaning and condition assessments every 2 years with sediment removal required by TCEQ every 5. We do have the tank inspected every 5 years and go through that process. There is also a small hole in the roof of that tank. It has not been repaired. There's also electrical cable on the inside that needs to move to a dry interior access letter. That has not been done. And there is a screen flapper combo overflow termination point that needs to be addressed. That if you all want to know the technicalities of that, Jesus can address it. But just know that from that inspection in 2018, we haven't done any of the repairs that were recommended. And this is what I mean, that we need to do better at the preventative maintenance and taking care of the assets that we've been entrusted with by the community. Make sense? If you'll go to the next slide, please. Jesus, just chime in whenever you're ready. So this is the inside of that tank. It's not necessarily attractive and it looks like somebody's bladder, but it is in better condition than you would think. And so we do need to consider a plan moving forward on this one, but we're just not quite there. Now this is where it starts to get a little bumpy. This is actually one of our water wells that we have drilled, and what you may not be able to see very easily is this tank is leaning because the ground has given way underneath it. As a result of that, the tank has to be replaced and the ground and the infrastructure underneath it has to be rebuilt. This is one of 4 operational wells that we have in the city. It actually does pretty good for us. It draws about 40 gallons a minute, but it needs immediate attention as well. It has deteriorated over the past number of years, and the contractors that we've had look at it, silly me, thought we could just shove it back up and it'd be all right. And they said, no, the metal's compromised. We're going to have to replace the entirety of the tank as well. So we'll be looking at galvanized tank replacement for that one because it lasts pretty long and it's the least expensive option for us. I mean, they have those things going up to glass blown interiors and all kinds of things. We're not ready for that yet, but we can look at the galvanized and work on that. This is ground storage tank well number 4. The previous one was 3. We could not find when this tank was installed. This one also currently pumps about 40 gallons a minute and needs attention. These photos were taken from above the tank looking down into the interior, and you can see the rust that exists on that tank and some of the things that need to be dealt with. If you'll go to the next slide, we'll show the interior. So this is the inside of that tank. And that is probably one of the worst ones that we have. So we need to prioritize that for replacements and or repair or rehab. But again, it doesn't really rise to the level of needing to issue debt. We need to figure out a different way to come at this. So it's included in conversations with council, but not through the bond issuance. So this is ground storage tank well number 5. This one was actually installed in 1991. It currently only pumps about 10 gallons a minute. It needs about $25,000 worth of work, and we could potentially get 40 gallons a minute out of this, which would be a big deal. Our current contract with Walnut Creek Special Utility District allows for us to receive 1,050 gallons a minute if they have the water available. If they don't, and we are on water restrictions, then we get what they give us. If we can augment that with our own wells to some extent until we find a secondary water source and can get us past the next 5 years, then we'll be in a better position to serve the residents. I think most of you would have recalled the water restrictions we were under last year. That wasn't pleasant for you or for us. I anticipate the same thing this year. I know that Walnut Creek is working on their own system to get additional capacity, but I don't know when that's going to come. We've been told maybe the end of this calendar year, maybe first part of next year, so that won't help us for this summer. But these are some things that we look at in the totality of the system and where we get the water from and what the costs are and what we can do to keep up with the demand as well as the systems that we've been given. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is ground storage tank well number 5 from the inside. The picture on the right, Jesus, you told me what that was.
The one on the right is the actual well, what produces the water out of the ground.
Yeah. And then the inside pictures you can see there also have some rust and deterioration that we're going to have to deal with. If you go to the next slide, here's some more pictures of well number 5. Okay, next one. This is the ground storage tank that is a little bit of a misnomer because you see the elevated tank there as well. This is well number 6. It was installed in somewhere in 1999 or maybe 2003. I have found documentation from both areas of that time period. This well is currently offline due to radon infiltration and rehab that's needed for this project. We did apply for a grant for those who are interested in that type of funding opportunity. We did receive that for about $350,000. We are hopeful that that will cover all of the costs, but if it doesn't, we'll have to figure out a way to bridge the gap because this well can produce pretty well for us as gallons per minute as it goes along. You'll also notice that in the picture on the right, one of the things that I've talked to council about is the potential to use the elevated tank that's not being used for water as a iconic marker for the city of Rome to brand that Old Town Rome or something to that effect so that, because you can see this from the highway. And this would give us a sense of place within our community center. So the first week I actually started working here, I had someone call me from out of state that somebody had inquired about knocking that down. I said, absolutely not. We are not looking at knocking that down until I've talked to council because this has so many other uses that you can't buy this kind of history. And so if we rebrand it, that could be something that would help jumpstart businesses in our downtown area and hopefully revitalize some of that space. So when you ask about potential solutions, go to the next one, please, ma'am. We may have some cash on hand in the utility fund. That's something that we could potentially look at. There's not enough. There's not $500,000 in that fund to address all of those. We do have some bids from a vendor maintenance program that they will come in and they will maintain and replace what needs to be done, and we pay them a monthly or an annual fee. That's an option. There's also a longer term finance option with what they call GovCap or government capital. That's something that cities use all the time for these type of projects. We can also seek grants from the Texas Water Development Board. For those of you who don't know, the grants are going to take a minimum of 24 months before we get any movement or know if we've been accepted. Then you have to plan the project, put out bids, and then we have to wait for the work to be done. So you're talking maybe 4 years before we could get this done, and that's pending we're approved. We have submitted for other grants on the West Wastewater Treatment Plant in the past, and we were not selected. So it's not a guarantee is what I'm trying to say. So based on which direction council wants to go will depend on the speed from which we can fix those tanks. This is a good place to ask for questions because from here we're going to head into wastewater. So can I answer anything about the water system or what you've seen today?
You referred to some of these things being part of the bond and some of them not part of the bond. Proposition A. So the drilling of the 3 new wells and then rehab, does the rehab portion of the bond include rehabbing all those tanks that you showed pictures of?
Not at current, no.
It seems to me it would make more sense from a professional point of view to take those 3 wells that put out minimum water, 40 gallons a minute. That's not going to cut it. Go in, cap those, go to the same sites, re-drill, get your well put out like 200-300 gallons a minute. Is that an option?
It's an option we've looked at, yes. Because if we can re-drill on the same site, we may be able to use some of the infrastructure that currently exists, but I'm not going to know that till we can pursue this option or not.
Because it seems like to me, if we throw money at these projects that already existing, it'd be better to start over from scratch because you're still just fixing a problem and you're just going to have something else happen down the road. I've seen it happen. So
I agree with you that that would be best, but we priced the replacement of those ground storage water tanks and Jesus and I almost fell out of our chair.
And the intent is to utilize like Bobo or 34, 33, the bigger tanks for new wells. And then another good spot would be well 5. But from there, we would need the whole infrastructure, a new ground storage tank big enough. And we would keep the other wells that are online, at least we can drill side by side. One's in the Paluxy, the other one's 700 foot deep or close to 1,000. So you can pull at the same time and it won't hurt the aquifer. Sure.
So yeah, we have looked at a variety of options for both of those.
We 40 gallons a minute. That's it's good quality water, but it's not anything. And we have to keep them to stay out of a deficiency with the state. Yeah.
Questions?
Well, concerning those areas that you have to re-drill next to, so I'm assuming you're using the latest geotechnical study.
Water test. Yeah, we're gonna do a. Oh, the name just escaped my head. Test wells. There we go.
Just test well.
Yeah, we gotta do test wells, and we gotta make sure the water's there
How old
before.
how old are those?
No, we'll be
We'd have to
creating
do
the
it.
ones.
Have to do them.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes, sir. For each location, because
Correct.
like you're saying, you can't go put $1 million well and then just
Have
hope
it
you
come
hit
up dry.
water.
Yeah, you have
That's
to have current, that's where I was going with that, is you have to have a current geotech.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We'd work with Upper Trinity on that project.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
We don't have the engineers on staff for that, so we try and use those resources like Louis that's in the back for us. The Rural Water Association has been a godsend for us to get some information, so we're very grateful for their help.
What's the current status of our drinking water quality then, with all these pictures?
We have not had any we haven't had any violations with the state. And currently everything that goes in the tank is still within the TCQ parameters. There's no birds or anything landing inside, but the longer we wait, well 4, well 5, the roofs are about to fall in. They're very thin. You walk up there, you're probably going straight through the top. We're in regulation, but the longer we wait, it's just making it worse.
And the system in the past has failed the water testing components. I found some documents from 10 or 15 years ago,
For
maybe.
TTHMs,
Yeah.
we were over chlorinating at the time. I guess they had the chlorine way too high, and that's what creates it.
That was
But
rectified.
that has been resolved in the last few years.
Can I just say that the pictures that were shown appear to be of from the inside looking at the roof. Most of the time, water does not touch those areas. So the lower areas are not going to be as rusted because the air is chlorinated air, so it's breaking down that metal, and obviously you have to have a roof. So that's the issue. But most of that rust that you see is not actually getting into your water.
And Mr. Dominguez, just to clarify, you or one of your employees does daily water tests for quality. See? Yes?
Yes, we have daily tests. We got monthly, quarterly, semi-annual. We keep up with everything.
Any more questions on the water? All right, let's move into the wastewater issue. So looking at your wastewater system, Rome is in a unique position in that we have 2 wastewater treatment plants. A lot of cities have one or one large one, but based on the topography that you find in Rome, we have one to the east and we have one to the west. We used to have only the east plant, and we would take all of the effluent and the raw sewage and we would lift it and pump it over the ridge and let it drain to the east plant. That is not as efficient as gravity flow, and the plant couldn't handle it at that point. So we ceased that back in the mid 90s when we put the west plant online.
Yeah, I think the intent was they were having, I guess, the Ellis subdivision made at the time, and instead of putting another lift station because it was further down, maybe the costs were, I'm assuming, lower to put a plant in, and that's what ended up splitting the system.
And we did get a grant for that, best I can tell from our records. So the west plant was originally through a grant. And we also got the land, I believe, as part of the agreement with the Ellis development so that the city didn't have to pay for that either. But your sewer plant, actually, or your sewer system has about 9.5 miles of gravity flow piping. We have about just under a mile of sewer force main, 150 different manholes around the city that we're aware of, 2 main lift stations and 1 collection lift station. So it's not as large as the city of Fort Worth, but it is still a fairly complex operation that they're running. If you'll go ahead. We're going to do a quick overview of the east plant, and hopefully if you have any questions, just stop me. This east wastewater treatment plant was originally built in 1991 and can handle about 100,000 gallons of flow each day. It is currently running pretty darn well. We don't have issues with this one unless we have a stop up, which we did last night or yesterday.
This morning.
This morning.
Well, last night into this morning.
So we had a slight overflow there. It did not escape the bounds of the plant itself, so that's not the issue. And staff located it quickly and were able to undo the blockage and things returned to normal. The nice thing about this plant was it was originally built with Imhoff lagoons, which are basically big trenches that the effluent sits in, and they upgraded that to a mechanical plant in 2012. The city did. The equalization basin that you see, Jesus, that's the one in this closest
Yes,
corner
ma'am,
to me,
closest to you.
where you see the blue dump truck on the left. That was installed in 2020. We originally had a developer that was looking to develop the Prairie Point housing addition that is in the city limits. That would be anywhere from 1,200 to 1,500 new homes, so more than double the size of Rome and its residents. And as part of that, the city had a component piece to upgrade. And so at this point, if a developer comes in and is going to install the housing addition in Prairie Point, the developer will bear the cost of expanding the plant because it is modular and it can be expanded, and that's how it was designed. So we were very fortunate, and you'll see a slide as to the cost of the bonds for that when we put it in. It was done pre-COVID and pre all the cost escalation, so we got a great deal at $2.5 million. I know that's a lot of money, and it can throw people for a loop, but if we had to do this today, it'd be $8 or $9 million. So we did get in on the right curve for that one. That's the most efficient of our current plants. If you go to the next slide, ma'am. Hey, Suze, you want to walk them through what these components are?
Yes, ma'am. So on the left picture, you have your further left, there's a lift station, which collects all the sewer. It pumps it into these square tanks. The square tank on the left is your aeration basin. That's where your sewer mixes in with bacteria. It all mixes in, and the one on the right, it's for your excess, for what your plant no longer wants. And it'll throw it into the round circle on the right, and there it'll hit the center of the plant. It'll settle down. Your clear will stay up top, and your solid waste will stay at the bottom. And then we go into a chlorine contact chamber disinfection. From there, it goes into your permitting creek or wherever we're authorized by the state for our exit point.
So any questions on the east plant? Because it's doing pretty well. We don't spend a lot of time on this one. If not, we're going to move into the west, which is the photos you see here. So the West wastewater treatment plant, as I mentioned, was originally built in 1998. It actually has a slightly higher flow than the East plant at 150,000 gallons a day. This plant has had a number of TCEQ violations for overflow and plant issues that started what we can tell timeline in 2015. We have been trying to address these since then through a variety of measures, and we can talk about some of those, but we have not gained compliance as of yet. This has had no significant upgrades since the installation. It still uses the ground level drying beds, which you can see there beside Chief Debus, and ammonia filters that are in one of these pictures that Jesus will talk to you about that have not worked well since the plant was installed. Next slide, please, ma'am. So this photo is of the outside of the tank, and it doesn't look terrible from that side. When you go to the next slide and you start to look at the West plant at capacity, this is, Jesus, tell them what this component piece is.
So this is the aeration basin, your main part of the plant that mixes your sewage with bacteria to keep it alive, the plant working. And so it's not supposed to be that full. From there, honestly, that's after a small rain event. If you get hit with 2 rain events in 2 days, it's going to overflow. Anything over 1 inch of rain, I'm having to go out there and double check, because it is my responsibility to make sure I contact the state within 24 hours that the plant is overflowing. And that's when we call in trucks, when we call in the Vector, guys are out there. That's when we're not non-compliant with the state.
Next slide, please, ma'am. So this shows you the drying beds from above. We have 4 different sets of those, and I'm going to turn some of this over to Jesus and just,
We'll walk through it.
yes, if you would, please, sir.
Okay, so this is old technology. It's simple. You have sand, rocks. It's a filter. You, when your plant is full, it has to take the excess of the bugs, bacteria out. And so we'll dump it in these beds, and these beds will settle down. The clear will go through back to the plant, and your solids remain up top. And when it dries, it's called a drying bed. We pick the stuff up with a backhoe and some shovels and put it in a roll-off dumpster. I was trying to see if I see a picture of it. Yeah, on that far end, on that top picture over here on the left. This one right there, yeah. Where it's, yeah. So the dumpster's at the top end, and once that's dumped into that dumpster, the landfill takes it, they process it, recycle it, whatever they do with it. Usually sell it back to farmers. But on the bottom where Chief's hand is the ammonia filters, a little bit left. So those filters, from my understanding, were put in and they were bought from a surface water treatment. It's not wastewater, surface. And all it is water trickles through, same kind of like the drying beds. Your solids stay up top, and your clear goes out so it can make its way through disinfection. We have tried, I have been here twice, around for 2 times where we've spent $150,000 each time, and both times the same result. As soon as we turn it on, the plant gets overwhelmed. It what's called a washout. So everything turns brown. It goes into the creeks. You go out of compliance, and they have been offline since because they do not work, and that's another issue that we have to resolve.
Actually, we'll probably skip over it because we just went over that. We just went over this, so go on to the next one.
I meant to say on the drying beds, and this last investigation we had, so those drying beds are supposed to dry typically during the summertime, 2 weeks. Those have not been dry since, I would say, October, and they have been topped off, so I have to call a company to come and take that stuff to Fort Worth or elsewhere, and our technology is out of date on this plant. Our other plant has a press that'll do that same technology of 2 weeks. It'll do it in minutes, and that's how we stay ahead. And that I just want to make sure that our technology is out of date on that plan. And on the left, those are the blowers. That's what keeps the bacteria alive. It just keeps circulating. And on the right is the main lift station. All your sewer from town, from Old Town, speaking on this part, everything you flush down the toilet, that's where it goes. And from there, two pumps pump it up into the plant, and they'll go through the bar screen, which is that far right part, left one. Oh yeah, those two. It don't matter. And from the bar screen, this will go into the sewer plant, and this is another issue with the state. So those gaps on the far right, they're supposed to screen out rags, anything that's not supposed to go in the sewer plant. Well, ours are, I'd say, a good inch apart, and this stuff ends up out in the creek because it floats its way through, and this causes another issue with the state because you're not allowed to. The whole point of the sewer plant is to stop the stuff from impacting the environment. So when the state does show up, that's why they look at the creek. That's the first thing they go and look for in the creek is rags and such. And as soon as they see that, you're non-compliant.
So that's a pretty general overview of the West plant. We're happy to answer any questions. I'll grab that mic right next to you, sir.
Okay, so for Jesus, and I know we have one medical person here, at least that might help. So if these bonds don't fail, you and your guy, or these bonds fail, you and your guys have to continue cleaning human waste by hand, right? So does the city provide the proper PPE for y'all to be doing this? And what are the health hazards associated with short-term, long-term risks of continuing to do it this way?
Well, we get rubber boots and gloves. I mean, that I've been sprayed from head to toe before, and it's not pleasant. I try to avoid stuff like that, you know. There is another hazard is needles that do go in, and hepatitis is a big thing. Hepatitis C, right? No. So, yeah, we do give, well, in the past, I'm talking years ago, we used to get, I don't remember. Yeah, years ago, we used to get just like a general vaccine, and that's it. It's just rubber boots and gloves, never hazmat suits or nothing like that.
Are you referring to cleaning the drying beds?
Just in
No,
general.
like the
Just in
spills
general.
and walking through all that to get to the chlorine contact chamber. When the spill's really bad, you can't avoid it. You got to walk through it.
And that's, you know, we, as wastewater operators, we understand that we're going to be dealing with that kind of stuff. And that it's just one of those accepted things. It's not great, but it is what it is, you know?
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, yeah, there's the potential risk, and we know about it. There is ways to mitigate it. That is for sure, though.
So the new, if I'm not mistaken, TCEQ, most environmental now, secondary containment. I don't know if that's part of it or not, but are they having you guys do that, put a secondary containment in?
You mean like an equalization basin or something to divert water?
No. So the west, it overflows on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Secondary, just like a fuel tank. You have to have a secondary.
Like a
per
distance,
per
yes, they can
TCEQ,
put,
oh yeah. Per
yes, they can
OSHA.
put lime down,
Oh, yeah.
powdered
And they have
lime,
either
that kind of thing.
either they have it can either be earthen
Uh-huh.
with a concrete form, or a system, built system in place. And I'm just curious about that. I mean,
So we do have a berm on the West plant on the backside to try and keep it contained on site instead of
Right.
getting it into the
Yeah.
creek. But it's not massive and it sometimes gets breached.
And we can't build it high enough
that's
because
where I'm going.
either way, if we go 6 foot tall, the contact chamber sits off the ground 6 inches. So regardless, it'll be a pass through. It'll just go straight through and end up in the creek regardless. We have attempted the berm because you're right. The state's like, you got to do something. But once it breaches that berm, it's tankers trying to haul it off.
So back when the East Side plant was redone, a question came up about pumping from the west side into the new east side. And at that time, the estimate was $14 million to pump that. So have you asked that question this time, whether it's more cost effective to pump from that direction to the east side plant?
I would say the costs have probably gone up, and I don't know the numbers, but I'm gonna guess realistically it's probably gonna be a lot more than the sewer plant.
The east plant's also pretty much at capacity but functioning well. So if we try to mitigate one with the other,
It's not gonna work.
there's
We'll
no
break
capacity there for that. If the east plant was 200,000 gallons a day, that might be a different story, but it's smaller than the west plant.
You would have to build a whole nother east plant right next to that one, or
Second.
to expand that one, and then pay for lift stations to boost that from the west to the east.
And all the technology would have to be updated because you're pushing double capacity at that point, and that doesn't even include new builds. That's just to take on the west plant.
I mean, the ridge is beautiful. I mean, it's amazing how far you can see, but it creates a unique challenge for the city because we basically have two systems on either side. And that is some of the challenge that we face. It's lovely, but it presents unique things through which to deal with that a city of Boyd may not have to deal with. What other questions can we answer?
If Proposition B fails, I've heard people ask, okay, what's Plan B? Right? Now, I heard you reference earlier that we still have to, whether the bond passes or not, we still have to replace the west side wastewater treatment plant.
That would be my recommendation. Now, the city could do nothing, and we will continue to receive fines and costs from TCEQ to remediate the issues with the current plant. At some point, that's going to exceed the cost of the bonds.
So if we do nothing, then eventually that cost is going to exceed the cost of the bonds.
Yes. Now,
And if people still don't want to pass a bond to do it, then you're talking about maybe reducing staffing in the city, other services.
that's not going to fix that issue through that lens. You're going to have TCEQ come in and do an enforcement and take over your plant, and they're going to charge you to fix it.
And that's eventual. Just
Well, we've been at this now since 2015, so I think eventually it's getting closer.
I used to know a director here. Well, he was a director later on, but back in 2000, I'd say 7 area, they had the same overflows. So it dates back further, but not everybody does the right thing and reports. I'm not saying he did or didn't, but paperwork may have been lost or the reports may have been done differently. It's just,
so that's one Plan B. And another one you referenced earlier was we just go ahead and replace the plant anyway, but we pay for it with increased sewage rates.
Water and sewer rates, yes.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing about water and sewer rates is they are applied to everyone equally. It doesn't matter if you're over 65 or if you're disabled, your water and sewer bill would go up. So we're trying to find the best path forward to give the residents a choice. But I think, from my professional opinion and from at least 2 public works directors that have been through here and others who have visited our plant, the same recommendation has been echoed by all of them. The plant has exceeded its lifespan. And there, I know that there was a question of how long do plants last, and I would say if they're properly maintained and upgraded, probably longer than we've gotten out of this one. But if you'll, let's see, hang on just a second, let's see how far. Go to the next slide, please. Next one past this. We've already talked about the cost. So if you look at the system itself, Chief, can I have that microphone? From the entirety of when we started finding our records and moving forward, from this angle, you'll see that in 1990, we, in the lifespan of this system, have only spent about $8 million to upgrade and maintain a multi-million-dollar system. So when you look at those numbers and you amortize it out over the 33-year period, that's about $240,000 that should have been added in for depreciation and other things. And because we did not do that, we are so far behind. Had the West plant received some of the maintenance issues and taken care of itself through that, probably could have gotten another 10 or 20 years out of the plant, but we've exceeded that capacity at this point. And just to be clear, that $2.6 million was the bond for the East plant that brought it up to code and brought it into the current technology that it enjoys today.
So if they come in and take this, you guys don't do the bond, don't do anything else. I'm just a business owner here, okay? The citizens don't vote this bond on. The city doesn't pay to fix it. The state or whoever comes in and takes this over. Whatever the cost is whatever the cost is, correct?
Yes.
That cost transfers 100% to the citizens, I'm sure.
That's my understanding,
They're just not
yes.
going to eat it.
No,
So if
they're
it
not.
costs $30 million, the citizens are going to have to eat that $30 million. Not saying it's that extreme, but it could be. I've never had the government come in and go, hey, we're going to give you this to you for a subsidized price, right? So whatever that cost is, they'll run that gamble with what it is. And it goes to them however it is, correct?
Yes, but you also have the issue that running up until that date, you're going to receive fines and violations that are going to have to be paid.
Then that's the example of that. So if it's not paid, just like anybody else, they're adding fees, penalties every time that bill's not paid.
That's my
So
understanding,
you're
yes.
gonna, I'm sure, be charged interest and everything else because that's what happens.
It can go to daily fines too. So it just depends on the severity.
We need to lighten this whole meeting up, guys. Kenny, I think you have Jeff Bezos' phone number, don't you? Just give him a call. Tell him, come on down, guys.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So I just want to clarify, gentleman, two minutes ago was talking about Plan B and the taxes. Who has to eat those taxes if the bonds fail? So if the bonds pass, everybody except for the disabled and the 65 and above, they would have to pay the taxes, right? So if the bonds fail and then the city still goes forward, then the 65 and above and the disabled and veterans like me, we would then have to pay those taxes along with everybody else.
There would be a change in your water and sewer rates, yes. If that's the avenue that is pursued to pay for the project, yes. Because the water rates are applied based on usage and they're not based on age exemptions or disability exemptions. The city doesn't have the ability to do that.
There is one more thing to think about that gets even worse for those that would have to pay. There are 2 subdivisions that do not use the sewer systems. Chisholm goes to Newark, and Bywell has septic system.
Correct.
And so, if it didn't pass, and they come in and they put those charges out to everybody, it won't be everybody. But there's 2 subdivisions that would not be affected at all. If the propositions pass, then Bywell and Chisholm can help.
I've also had the question of what benefit is this to those developments then? Why should we vote for it? And as I started out this conversation with you all earlier, and the number of developers that are looking to come in and bring amenities to the city of Rome that could be enjoyed by every resident, that's where the value comes in. I have a gentleman that's looking at a piece of property right over here that would like to bring in, I've heard him talk about an Applebee's and other sit-down type restaurants there. I've talked to that same gentleman who is looking at developing property just this side of the Loves that would like to put in some small retail area and some more fast food, which I know that's not always what everyone wants, but it is of help to us. And as we diversify that tax base and as we spread that out, then the load on the people that are here goes down. Because right now our tax base is pretty small. and it's pretty concentrated and it's heavily residential. So we need to diversify into that commercial base so that we're not only getting ad valorem off the commercial, but we're also accessing that sales and use tax, because that's crucial to providing the services that you all want and would enjoy. I know, I heard when I came in that people want a grocery store in Rome. I'm surprised there's not one. Even Boyd has a little grocery store. But we are at the center of 2 highways and nobody has invested that in Rome yet. So we have to figure out ways to increase that capacity so they can come in. And I will tell you that most people are looking along that west side for that west plant, and I cannot hook up one more toilet to that west plant. And so through that lens, I can't offer that developer anything to come here. So they will then look at Boyd. And one of the things that we talked about at the last meeting was, if you compare Rome and Boyd, which is fairly similar in size and fairly similar in demographics, what do you see that's different? They have businesses and restaurants and a grocery, and they're expanding their roadway through partnerships with TxDOT and other things that we haven't had the advantage of yet. So we need to know how to capitalize on that, and we need to know how to negotiate those development agreements, and we need to be pursuing things in the best interest of the city of Rome and the residents. Because as I've said to you all before, and as I said when I was interviewed, this city and its potential is endless. You are literally at the nexus of tens of thousands of cars that come through here every day, and we're not capturing nearly what we should be capturing in sales and use tax and our other potential for this area. So we have to manage the development and manage it well. But I'm getting calls from people from Dallas that are looking for industrial, that are looking to bring in X, Y, and Z, and they're just waiting for us to have some movement and some progress. Yes, sir. Mike in the back. Oh, sorry.
So on all of these bonds, right, the 11 million, the 3, the 3.5, does that get us just caught up to where we should be, or is that going to put us in a better position for the future?
So that's a great question. The plant would expand. We're making that larger than it currently is and increasing those efficiencies, so then we can hook up to that plant for those businesses that want to come in that area. If the wells are drilled and they do provide us additional gallons per minute, then I can offer them water and sewer. We're good to go. We're also in the process of working through a regional partnership with the mayors in Southern Wise County to form a regional water district to locate surface water, because wells are not going to last us forever. And we're also trying to pursue a secondary water source to see how else we get water to this region, because everyone in Wise County is, let me rephrase that, most people I talk to in Wise County are surprised at the speed of the growth that has come out here, and they see the potential, but everyone's looking for water.
What does, we're in Ellis Homestead, so obviously just to the north of us, it's all owned by Northwest Independent School District. How does this play in?
So Northwest is building a new school there by Chisholm, Prairie View Elementary. They are reconstructing that one. They may or may not build an additional site there. They have talked about purchasing additional land in this area to bring in an early childhood development center, and they do have site for a high school. Currently, I can't accommodate them. And I will tell you that in every city I've ever worked for, your school system drives your home values. And if you have a strong school system and people look at this as a great place to raise a family, you will see your home values go up. And while it may not affect you right now today, when you go to sell, I promise you it will. The previous community I worked for, that was a big push. So we need to make it hospitable for Northwest so that as those schools come in, it drives that complexity, it expands that base. It allows us to be vibrant and direct our own future rather than being passive and waiting for it to come to us. We don't own all the property around Rome, and this is one of the hardest things for any city that is this size. Because we don't own it, we don't get to direct it. It's entitled for certain uses, so we want to work with the developers as best we can to get something that's equitable on both sides. but because we don't own it, we can't tell them they can't come. And that's often misunderstood. Small communities, especially if folks have lived here for a long time. I've been in Wise County for 25 years. I'm not particularly thrilled with all this, but I knew it was going to come, and I have the choice to make to move further out or don't. So through that lens, if we can help drive the development and work with them in partnership, we are always going to come out better. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
I don't want to distract from the message of the evening, but for those of you that I don't know, I'm Peter Pinkoff. I'm the developer of Rolling V. I have a couple of thoughts. One of them is I don't know how you can look at the photos that you've seen and hear the stories about the condition of the existing system and not just take it as an absolute given that this has to be fixed. There's no choice. It's inhumane in a lot of ways. And so, and I want to be clear. I don't have any direct gain for Rolling V from any of this. But for what I would describe, and I've been involved out here for 5 years since we bought the property, and I've very intentionally tried to avoid sort of getting involved in local politics. I have no choice but to speak up at this point. I mean, the dysfunction in this town is very, very widely known all around, and businesses avoid coming here because of the very loud voices of a relatively small number of people. And so what I would encourage you all is, to the extent that you agree with what's being suggested here and you're in support of the bond, you need to knock on your neighbors' doors. You need to encourage folks to get out to vote, because these elections are decided by like 200 votes. You can go get your neighbors to get 200 more people to come out and vote, and you can secure the future of your city. And in my view, it is an absolute false choice to say, if we don't make these investments, our tax rate goes down. The tax rate on a home that has absolutely no services, no water, sewer, no nothing, is going to be, it doesn't matter, because your home is no longer worth anything. And so these things have to be fixed. So I don't want to be just griping at people. I spent the afternoon today finalizing a contract with a very, very large and what I think would be a very well-received grocery company for a very large grocery that would come into our project and would serve Rome and the surrounding area. They will not come if Rome cannot take care of itself. Yeah, well, it's not, and I don't mean being petty. I'm not, but if Rome cannot take care of its own city services, if Rome cannot clean up its own sewer, if Rome cannot provide water, etc., then those businesses are not going to come. Folks are going to continue to drive through. And so let's think about that for a second. There's the benefit of having a grocery. There are hundreds of jobs that are created by it. There's sales and use tax that we share evenly with the city of Rome. That would come in and, by the way, pay down the cost of this debt. The best way to reduce your property taxes that you're paying is to share them with more people. And so to the extent commercial comes, residential is different. Residents in Bluestem and in Reunion, they're not paying property taxes that benefit the city of Rome, but commercial does. And sales and use taxes come to the city, and that is found money for you all, and it can help pay for and offset the cost of what's not an insignificant amount of money. And so I want to encourage you all to be fully engaged. Don't just be discouraged. Go get your neighbors to get out and support this. I personally paid for, just so that y'all know, a whole bunch of signs that say vote for the bond, and I don't have anything to do with this, but they're going to go up all over town over the next few weeks. And I don't think it's a choice, and I think that you guys can do right by yourselves. It feels painful to do something that will raise your property tax rate but the alternative is very grim. And there's so much good that wants to come here, and we can help. We work with Amanda and Jesus and city staff all the time. We can help. We built a package sewer plant 2 years ago. We have all sorts of information that we regularly share. We have engineers that are, have studied the groundwater. We're about to drill a bunch of wells of our own to help offset the water issues. We're going through all the same things, but we're having to take on what would be the city's responsibility typically, or in the city's purview, because we cannot rely on Rome to deliver. And so I've got really high hopes for this place, but I think, and you guys have great people that are here involved, and you're going to need to make some investments in the city of very basic infrastructure in order to keep your staff around, and keep folks that want to help you continue to run this. And it's unpopular and all that in some ways, but if I had to guess, there are a lot more people that live here that view the future as bright than, are trying to hold it back. So.
What other questions? Yes, sir.
So I know we just touched on residential and commercial development, and there's been some rumblings on social media that the reason why Prairie Point has not been developed is because of negotiation tactics of the city and how hardball that we play. It's not because of anything else, but they think we could just drill under the highway and tap in somewhere else and get all this water, wastewater. But is it not the main reason developers are not developing there is because of these exact issues that these bonds would fix?
So I like to think I'm a tough negotiator. You can ask Peter. But it is due to the water and wastewater issues that we are currently on hold with Prairie Point, excuse me. We have a very good company that has come forward, in my opinion, that would like to put in 1,200 single-family residential units on that property, and they have agreed to a cap on multifamily. For those of you who don't understand, apartments cost the city a lot of money to service, and they don't bring as much revenue as you would expect. The current planned district that overlays Prairie Point does not have a cap on multifamily, so they could build as much and wherever they want. That is advantageous to them, but I'd prefer we don't look like North Fort Worth. There are a lot of apartments, 3 and 4 story through there, and if they're willing to put that cap in, then I'm willing to work with them through a variety of lenses. But the holdup right now is water, which is why the council's coming at this from more than one direction. We're looking at finding a secondary water source from someplace else. We're looking at potentially drilling our own water, which costs pennies on the dollar versus what we pay to Walnut Creek, and we still have our contract with Walnut Creek. And it may take all 3 of those actions to deal with the growth that wants to come to Rome and to provide that water to them, including school districts and others. And we are also pursuing that regional water district, which is a 40, 50-year lookout for the area, because Wise County is hurting for water literally across its 900 some odd square miles. So Mr. Loftus has been to a lot of those meetings. We've talked with Mr. Johnson at council meetings about these things, and I'm happy to answer any questions for anybody who wants to call City Hall and ask.
I want to piggyback. What was your name? I'm sorry. Peter, I'm Robert. Me and my wife have small businesses. We came to Rome because I'm from small town America, okay? I really am. I think my sister graduating class was 26 people, South Texas. We came here because we wanted our businesses to grow. We wanted to be in Wise County. I've got 4 beautiful daughters that are going to take over the businesses we have. We didn't come here for 4 years. We rent the building from Staple. I feel it's right there in the middle of town. We're wanting to take another building and try to redevelop it and make it beautiful. Okay, guys? I am fortunate enough, I deal with a lot of business owners in Fort Worth. Some really great people that own a lot of businesses. And when I told them we're moving here to Rome, they told me I was crazy. And that's sad. I took the gamble. I came here. I don't really need Rome to grow because of the businesses we do. We deal outside of all over the state of Texas, but I want it to grow because I want to put people's jobs here. I want to bring other businesses here. When I talk to other buddies with restaurants and other stuff, I'm like, hey, let's put one here. I think it'll be killer because we got so many different people in the area. They don't even want to risk it. And that says a lot. And that hurts because this is something that's a cool town. I've talked to every one of these people that run the city, and every one of them care about the citizens and where the money goes and how it's spent and what it's done with it. And I can't see, and it kills me watching as many people try to say that they're trying to line their pockets. I know some other city managers, chiefs, and they make a lot more money than these guys. And it's sad because every time I sit down with them, they go, well, we got to do what's best for everyone here. So put that in consideration. And I mean, when I said that earlier about splitting the bill with you, like with the state or whoever comes takes us over, that's a lot more expensive than this right now. It's a lot more expensive, and the state don't care about who gets affected.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on something you were talking about earlier from a subscription water service versus a well. You know what we do? We have Upper Trinity come in. We take on 2.5 MGD. We rather use our wells, and here's why. In 5 years, through water revenue, we can own the well. We'll never own Upper Trinity. We'll never really own the lines that Upper Trinity has. We'll use them. But when you drill a well and you pay for it, then that's just water revenue. That goes into a separate fund. And after the capital cost improvements and the impact fees, those things can be used to upgrade your infrastructure by themselves. So therefore, this small investment right here, heck, 5 years, we can own a well. I mean, it's not like renting. I mean, it's we will own the water. So just keep that in mind.
So last curtain call, we're getting very close to our hour and a half. Are there any questions that we did not address or that you all have heard out in the community that you'd like us to address? Okay, we did a good job. Okay, well, that's all the staff has. So we hope that this has been informative. The documents that are there, along with all these pictures, the presentation and the recordings are on the landing page of the city's website. So if you want to look at this later, or you forgot something, or you just want some information for those who were not here, please visit the city's website. I will also be posting some of this to social media as we go along, just so that everybody has had an opportunity to review and make their own decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.